The chamber pulsed with a quiet gravity that no sound could disturb. Suspended in orbit above a collapsed star, the Galaxy Council had convened, an assembly of civilizations so old and vast they had forgotten how it felt to be uncertain. The air, if it could be called that, shimmered with bioelectromagnetic signatures and translator pulses. Species that breathed plasma, light, or thought itself hovered in their designated spheres. The architecture of the room had no geometry. It bent itself according to the needs of those inside. And yet, amid all this precision, there was one irregularity. The human seat remained empty. Its presence was no accident. It had been crafted deliberately, not by humans, but by the Council itself. A symbolic gesture, placed at the very center of the ring. The kind of thing a ruling body does when it wants to say, *, we've noticed you. Now it's your turn to be polite, *. Only humanity hadn't responded. Not with an acknowledgement, not with an envoi, not even with confusion. Nothing. For 11 galactic cycles since the invitation had been dispatched, Earth had maintained complete and utter silence. It was not just unexpected. It was impossible. No species ignored the Council. The Velari, shaped like spiraling clusters of neural light, flickered agitation into the chamber. They received the beacon. Their satellite network logged it. They opened the packet. And still, no reply. A slow chime echoed from the Padari, a race that resembled floating obsidian with fault-line mouths. Perhaps they cannot translate it. A laugh, sharp and rhythmic, burst from the Lakth, who bore mechanical limbs and insectal minds. They deciphered dark matter fluctuations to map the series relay. They cracked quantum isolation theory while still burning hydrocarbons. Of course they can read it. Silence followed. Not agreement, but fear. The representative of the Sorith, ancient beings who once charted the outer voids before time became measurable, finally spoke. Their voice was like static behind a waterfall. If they understand and still do not answer, then their reason must be greater than fear. That possibility chilled even the Lakth. They reviewed data again. Primitive by galactic standards, Earth's transmissions showed signs of instability, but also something else. Growth without restraint. Energy harnessed from unstable atoms, sent hurtling through fragile metal machines. Colonies begun on hostile worlds. Probes launched into interstellar darkness with no return planned. Who builds like that? Who reaches without caution? Only species that expect not to survive, or worse, species that refuse to die. The Zari, whose form could only be glimpsed through the shifting edge of visible spectrum, processed aloud. 4 global near extinctions in 1 planetary century. Environmental collapse. Bioweapon exposure. Internal wars exceeding total galactic engagements over the last 10,000 cycles. And yet, they climb. There was unease in the chamber. The Council had summoned warlords before. They had reigned in worlds devoured by AI, calm civilizations overtaken by biomutative doctrines. But never had they encountered a species whose chaos wasn't an error in development, but a feature of it. A tool. The room dimmed. A timer had expired. The Sorith spoke again. They were given time. Now we must discuss measures. The suggestion was subtle, but clear. Intervention. Containment. Perhaps extinction, before Earth destabilized the careful order of the galaxy. Not everyone agreed. The Aquari, dwellers of a gravity-well ocean planet, pulsed blue as they spoke. Their music reached us before their words. Their stories hold sadness we have no translation for. If we silence them, we may silence something ancient in ourselves. Others were less poetic. What they feel is irrelevant, barked the Lakth. What matters is what they might do. An argument erupted, a rare breakdown of council decorum. One side spoke of potential, of free will, of waiting. The other side spoke of danger, of inevitability of action. Above them all, the human seat remained unoccupied, a void around which the galaxy twisted itself in speculation. And then the lights shifted. Sensors flared. A ship had just entered orbit. One ship. No transponder. No fleet. No reply to the dozens of hails. Just silence, until a low, mechanical voice cracked through the chamber. Earth acknowledges the invitation. Not from the ship. From the council room itself. The human seat no longer sat empty. The human presence changed the air. Not literally. Most species didn't breathe in the traditional sense, but perceptually. Attention tightened, posture stiffened, 100 different biological warning systems quietly activated. Yet no one moved against her. One representative. No weapons. No guards. Just a woman in a gray suit, standing in the most powerful room in the known universe like she had something more dangerous than either. The locked delegate leaned forward. Is this mockery? The human didn't answer. She waited. The Saurus shifted its mass. We expected delegation. You send a single organism? She finally spoke. You invited Earth. I am Earth. The response drew hisses, hums, flickers across species lines. Some were amused. Most weren't. The council chair, a multi-layered neural cluster known as Veritas 9, initiated proceedings. We recognize the presence of Earth's representative. We convene under Article 17, Evaluation of Threat Emergence. Your civilization has accelerated beyond predicted models. It resists categorization. Clarification is required. The human nodded. Proceed. The Padari delegate began. You destabilized 4 ecological systems on your origin planet within 3 of your centuries. Correct, she replied. You reassembled atmospheric balance without council templates, said the Valari. Yes. You weaponized quantum uncertainty, said the Zari. Then lost control of it. Twice. We regained control both times. The lock snapped. You burned cities to preserve ideas. You built networks that consumed minds. You embraced extinction probabilities. Why? The human answered without pause. Because survival has never been enough. Silence again. This answer didn't fit into any algorithm. The council tried a different angle. Explain your lack of response. Galactic protocol requires acknowledgement. You ignored it. No. We studied you. The Saurtha's outer shell pulsed red. Studied? For 60 years, she said. We intercepted your beacon within hours. Watched every signal, every transmission, every diplomatic exchange. We saw how you evaluate, classify, intervene. We saw how you decide who gets to grow, and who gets erased. The implication hit with force. Some shifted, others recoiled. You call yourselves guardians, she continued. But history shows a different pattern. Control disguised as unity. Compliance sold as peace. The Aquari rippled with uncertainty. What would you have done in our place? Understood that not every species climbs for the same reasons. That silenced even the Lochth. The Zari spoke again. What is it you believe Earth has earned? The human's expression didn't change. A place no one gave us. One we took step by brutal step. We are not your children. We are not your mistakes. We are not yours to manage. Several delegates initiated internal reviews. Protocol dictated that threats be recorded, postured against, measured. But this didn't feel like a threat. It felt like inevitability. You believe you're ready for equal status? She shook her head. That would require your permission. A beat. Then. We don't need it. There it was. The thing every race in the chamber had quietly feared. Not the technology. Not the military potential. But the certainty. The refusal to ask. The Lochth stood. Then state your purpose. Why are you here? To end the evaluation, she said. We are not a threat. We are the variable. Veritas 9 processed that through 17 interpretive matrices. None returned a match. Explain. We are the exception to your model. You think because you were first, you were right. But you weren't made to survive chaos. We were born in it. The Saurith voice darkened. Then you embraced disorder. No, she said. We master it. She looked at each delegate in turn. We took a world that tried to kill us and bent it into homes. We took metal and made it fly. We broke time with thought. And when the sky opened, we didn't wait for an invitation. We reached. The council remained silent. Then she finished. You called us here to understand what we are. You still don't. That's why this meeting matters. Not for us. For you. No one argued. They couldn't. The transmission ended, but no one moved. The chamber, accustomed to debate and data, sat locked in a silence no species had designed for. The human delegate stood unmoved, as if time had folded around her. What she'd said wasn't bombast. It was fact delivered without ornament, and that's what unsettled them. They'd prepared for arrogance, fear, requests. They hadn't prepared for self-certainty. The equerry broke the silence. Your arrival, your ship came alone. She nodded. We needed only one. The Loth calculated aloud. No visible weapons. No escort. No encryption layers on your communication. Are you testing us? No, she replied. We're revealing who we are. The Padari hissed. This is not diplomacy. It is posturing. No. This is postureless. The Zari, uncharacteristically still, spoke with calculated neutrality. Your confidence implies possession of unseen capabilities. We request clarity. The human answered plainly. You think power is what you see, a ship, a fleet, a threat. But that's not how we think. We built a civilization on a world that tried to wipe us out every generation. Our ancestors survived cold without fire, crossed oceans in wood, mapped the stars with no eyes in the sky. We do not measure power in size. We measure it in will. Veritas 9 pulsed once. You brought no data to support your fitness for status. Because we don't seek status. You came to reject our offer? There was no offer, she said. There was an expectation. An unspoken hierarchy. You wished to confirm your place above. But the moment you summoned us, you revealed doubt. The Sorith growled low through shifting tones. We are the reason the galaxy did not collapse under entropy. Then you should recognize what we are, she said. We are entropy's answer. A low ripple moved through the delegates, not anger, not yet, but the precursor to it. Still, she didn't retreat. She stepped closer, as if proximity mattered. Our species learned to master pain, not avoid it. We destroyed ourselves multiple times. We came back stronger every time. We are what happens when evolution never stops pushing. Veritas 9 interjected. Your resilience is acknowledged. But cooperation has prevented catastrophe across thousands of systems. Individualism threatens balance. She tilted her head. And yet your systems stagnate. Growth halted by consensus. Innovation buried under permission. You stopped expanding because safety became sacred. The Loth barked. You accuse us of cowardice? I state an observation. Several data pulses lit up across the chamber. Requests for verification, historical parallels, predictive modeling. The conclusion, for many, was unsettling. Humanity's pace was not just fast. It was accelerating exponentially, with no ceiling visible. The Padari leaned forward. Are you threatening galactic order? No, she said calmly. We're bypassing it. The weight of the answer hung heavy. Not war. Not alliance. A third path. One none of them had accounted for. The equerry whispered. And if someone tries to stop you? She didn't blink. They won't get a second chance. The words weren't loud, but they silenced everything. The tone lacked malice. It was delivery stripped of intimidation. Just cause and effect. The Saurus stirred again. You assume you cannot be contained. We know the difference between force and fear, she said. You've used the first to avoid the second. We use both only when provoked. Veritas 9 paused. Then explain your purpose. To observe the reaction, she said. We've already passed the test. The real question was how you would respond when the system encountered something it couldn't control. And what did you conclude? She answered without delay. You're not ready for what comes next. We are. That ended the discussion. Not because protocol dictated it, but because there was nothing else to say. She hadn't come to negotiate or announce. She had come to expose something long buried beneath bureaucracy and ancient dominance. She had come to remind the galaxy of something it had forgotten. Progress has no permission system. It simply happens. They asked no further questions. The tone had shifted, not by threat, but by realization. Her presence was no longer seen as anomaly but as inevitability. Protocols flickered silently in the background, models recalculating, expectations collapsing under the weight of something far more uncomfortable than fear, uncertainty. She took that silence as permission and began speaking again, not to request acceptance, but to deliver truth. You assume we arrived late. But we've been listening since the first ripple you made. We watched you monitor us, measure us, label us. Primitive. Volatile. Dangerous. Every species here has passed through similar evaluations. Compliance followed. We didn't comply because we didn't ask to be included. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. The weight was in the words, not the volume. You built this council for structure. To manage what grows. To avoid the chaos of unregulated evolution. And yet, that's all we've ever known. Every era of our history is marked by collapse followed by construction. Systems fall. Ideas rise. We don't fear the end of things. We mine it for fuel. A pause, not for effect, but for translation. No idioms. No flourish. Just meaning, adapted across dozens of neural networks and linguistic decoders. We are not immortal, not perfect, not unified. But what sets us apart is this: we adapt faster than your rules allow. We accept contradiction. We embrace failure as data. Pain doesn't stall us. It instructs. Veritas 9 processed the statement through multiple cognitive branches. The implications led to one clear pattern: unpredictability without self-destruction. That wasn't just rare, it was unmodeled. She continued, your species remember their first stars, their first engines, their first wars. Ours remember their first losses. We teach tragedy as foundation. Our heroes are flawed. Our myths begin in darkness. That's how we teach survival, not as avoidance, but confrontation. The Lochtha's mind flickered with suppressed agitation. You glorify suffering. No, she said. We extract meaning from it. You study the universe to preserve yourselves. We study it because it tried to kill us, and we refused. She walked slowly now, deliberate in motion, forcing every delegate to observe her, not as a threat, but as evidence. You fear chaos because you believe peace is the ultimate form of order. We believe peace is the reward for understanding disorder. Until then, struggle is not a weakness. It's proof that something matters. The council didn't reply. The information couldn't be dismissed. Not when so much of it already matched their own shadow reports. Humanity had resisted influence not through secrecy, but through divergence. They hadn't turned away from the galaxy. They had just chosen a different direction. She stopped in the center again. You called this meeting to determine if Earth belonged in your circle. But that's the wrong question. The real question is, why does your circle fear being incomplete? The Saurus stirred uneasily. You implied your presence improves us. No, she said plainly. I state it. Then came the sentence none of them expected. We came to listen, not to integrate. It dismantled centuries of procedure in a single phrase. Integration was the cornerstone of the council, acceptance through absorption. But she had dismissed the entire foundation without insult, without superiority. Simply as irrelevant. You saw our speed and called it recklessness. You saw our wars and called it instability. You saw our division and called it immaturity. But those were assumptions filtered through fear. What you missed was that we are one of the few species to survive its own worst nature. The Podari's translator crackled. You believe that entitles you to exemption? No, she said. It explains why we don't need approval. The room remained still. Power shifted not by force, but by clarity. No weapons had been drawn. No threats had been made. But a precedent had ended. She hadn't spoken to convince them. She had spoken so they could understand why Earth would never ask again. And now they did. The human was gone before the council processed what her presence had altered. She gave no farewell, no final look. Just silence in her wake, a silence that felt heavier than any warship ever constructed. Protocol resumed only because it had to, because procedure demanded it. But no one present returned to the meeting as they had begun it. Veritas 9 suspended the session without a vote. For the first time in 3,000 cycles, consensus was neither possible nor relevant. What the Council faced wasn't a diplomatic problem. It was a paradigm collapse. Within hours, isolated channels opened across the member species. Quiet discussions, encrypted beyond standard protocols, began surfacing. A few races urged caution. Earth might be bluffing, posturing to buy time. Others dismissed that notion quickly. The certainty in her tone hadn't allowed for performance. It had been the sound of someone who already lived in the future they feared. Internal briefings among high-level factions confirmed what the Council never said aloud. The human delegate never offered terms. Never requested membership. Never positioned Earth as an applicant. She had simply stated reality, one in which the Council's structure no longer encompassed the entire map of power. Some tried to initiate risk assessments. But modeling failed. Humanity's profile had too many conflicting variables. Too much variance in response. Their civilization didn't follow coherent arcs. It moved in unpredictable leaps, as if chaos wasn't a threat but an operating principle. In the days that followed, 3 distinct reactions emerged across the galaxy. The first, from the dominant Council species, was denial. They emphasized procedural integrity. Issued formal reports. Reassured their citizens that Earth had not disrupted any legal precedent. But beneath those statements were layers of concern. Because disruption had already occurred, it just hadn't followed the rules they expected it to. The second group responded with fascination. Smaller species, historically marginalized within the Council, began re-evaluating their place in the hierarchy. If Earth could bypass the latter entirely, perhaps they too had options never considered. Quiet alliances started forming, not with Earth, but because of it. Inspired by the proof that power wasn't something granted, but claimed. The third group, and perhaps the most dangerous, responded with fear. For them, Earth's rise represented an existential unknown. They began exploring containment scenarios. Covert surveillance increased. New classifications were developed, unmodeled threat archetypes, behavior prediction AIs, emergency response doctrines. But even their most advanced simulations failed to agree on one outcome. Because Earth didn't follow fear-based logic. It didn't escalate in expected ways. It adapted. On Earth, the public never learned the details. There were no press releases, no global broadcasts. Just a subtle shift in posture among those who already knew. A quiet increase in off-world asset movement. Communications realigned. Defense protocols expanded. Not in reaction to a threat, but in acknowledgement of a new stage. The message had been delivered. No reply was necessary. Among the Council's inner circles, a phrase began circulating. Not official. Not acknowledged. Just whispered between species with long memories. The apes didn't wait for the stars. They built their own fire. Centuries of dominance had depended on one assumption. That time favored the structured, the cautious, the coordinated. Earth had violated that belief not by dismantling it, but by refusing to participate in it. The rules had never been rewritten. They had been ignored. What humanity had introduced was not instability. It was acceleration. Not aggression. Expansion. They had not sought to destroy the Council's order. They had simply outgrown its relevance. And in time, other species would do the same. The Council's final report never used the word defeat. It categorized Earth as independent anomalous civilization, observed, non-integrated, non-hostile. But the last line, inserted by an unnamed source, survived in every copy, never redacted. They did not arrive. They emerged.